Afternoon, everyone. My name is Georgie Clark Magnus, and I'm a forester with A&A Trading, and we're proud to be session sponsors at this conference. A&A Trading is a family-owned business that has been operating on the coast for over 40 years, and our area of expertise is in forest management, log marketing, and forest stewardship, working on both our own tenures and with our First Nation partners, such as Dallas. So thanks to Dallas and the C3 Alliance team for putting on this, this great event and bringing us all together to listen and learn from each other. So with that, I'm here to welcome you all to the next talk, which is Seeing the Forest and the Trees. And I will be passing it on soon to our moderator, Beck. Mike is the president and partner at Capacity Forest Management, and he brings over 30 years of experience in the forest sector, ranging from First Nation forestry initiatives in tenure acquisition, strategic partnerships, and forest landscape planning. So with that, can you join me all in welcoming our panel?
Good afternoon, everybody. This is kind of a rookie move for me too here, being moderator, first time doing it. So bear with me too. I'm usually a right-handed person, but a major mountain biking downhill accident happened here just recently. So just gonna start off here. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate everybody allowing us to come on the panel here to talk about a very innovative partnership that we came to here just of recent with First Nations, industry, and government. And again, I've had the privilege to be an advisor, forestry advisor for Lake Babine Nation and Lake Babine Forestry as their forestry advisor. And through this journey of this partnership that took a number of years to go through and work alongside LBN's leadership, industry, and government, as representatives to navigate through some of these very complex challenges, as well as looking at exploring opportunities for the nation as well as industry. And building the relationship and trust was another key component to work towards a shared vision with this partnership. And, throughout this process, it was kind of clear, that it wasn't all about forest tenure. It came to an idea where Lake Babine wanted to see an Indigenous-led forest industry in their forest region, as well as their territory, as well as having land management, controlling their own management on the land base, utilizing their Lake Babine best management practices, as well as, looking at long-term stewardship, long-term forest sustainability in their territory, and also looking at other economic opportunities with this, as well as providing fiber security for industry. And throughout this collaboration with West Fraser, BCTS, and Lake Babine Forestry, it took a while, but again, we have some key individuals here, up here on the panel, and I'm proud to say that, we worked together here on a great partnership here that took a number of years, and I'm just going to basically invite them to introduce each other, and I'll just pass it over the conch over here to Duane.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, my name is Duane Crouse. I am a member of the Lake Babine Nation. If you guys all don't know, that's roughly central BC. I am the general manager for Lake Babine Nation Forestry. I took the long way around of sitting in this seat. I've done everything from first aid level 3. I'm a Red Seal heavy duty mechanic. I did that for a lot of years, and the nation was looking for somebody to look after their forestry operations, and since I've basically worked in it my whole life, here I am. And this is my very first time as well being on a panel, and I like that the younger folks are taking the step to sit up here. It's different. This thing is counting down in front of me. I think it's probably, hopefully, the end of this panel. But I would say, Masai. I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll keep it short. Jeff Mycock, I'm Vice President, Canadian Woodlands with West Fraser. Prior to that, I was Chief Forester for our BC operations for about 9 years, and that, during that period, spent a lot of time working with Indigenous communities across the province and looking for ways to participate proactively in reconciliation and adapt and evolve our forest management model in a way that would, really drive us towards improvement and long-term, fiber security in our sector. And, the opportunity really revealed itself with Lake Babine, and we came together and converged in our ideas and our principles to get to where we are today. So we'll take you through a bit of a journey and, a bit of that journey and a bit of a story, and hopefully have some time for some questions at the end here. So pass it over to Mike.
Thanks, Jeff. Mike Hykaway. I'm Assistant Deputy Minister in the Ministry of Forests for Regional Operations for the Northern Interior. It's a long title, but basically for decades now I've worked with Indigenous nations and companies on our forestry authorizations, management, consultation, and all the activities on the land base. It is daunting up here. There's a brightest light I've ever experienced is shining right in our face. It looks easy from out there. But yeah, we won't take a long time describing our roles. It's more about what is this, where did it come from, how did it initiate, and how did it end up being successfully implemented. So I'll pass it back to Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks, gentlemen. Just as kind of want to dive into, before we dive into the challenges and the outcomes of this partnership, we kind of want to dive into kind of the vision and the principles, what brought us to the table here. And we're going to kind of ask some of the questions about the vision for each of these panelists here. One of the questions for Duane, from Albion Forestry's perspective, what vision did Albion Forestry have for this partnership, and what was Albion Forestry's hope to achieve? So
Our Lake Babine Nation's vision of this partnership was basically kind of hashed out in something LBN did roughly 10 years ago. Is called a foundation agreement. Lake Babine Nation entered into this agreement, and it kind of gave us like the legs to stand on to go and talk with folks like West Fraser here, and try to build a relationship with them, and really some of the things we wanted to see out of it were we wanted to, of course, grow our tenure within our traditional territory. We wanted to make money for our nation, and we really wanted to be, part of the forest economy with employment and training as well. What was the second question there?
What was Albion Forestry's hoping to achieve? Yeah,
that's so basically, that's what we wanted to achieve, and I think with this partnership and some of the tough talks that we had, I think we're well on our way of achieving those. I would say, Masai.
And I got a question here for Jeff here. What made partnering with Albion Forestry the right approach, and why was the company willing to explore a model that looked different from traditional tenure arrangements?
Thanks, Mike. We've been looking for some time to try and build a model of success, and we worked with several First Nations in the province and different concepts and ideas. And really at the end of the day, what's most critical for us is security and access to fiber. We're a forest products manufacturing company. We're involved in forest management, but we do that forest management in conjunction and working closely with Indigenous people and First Nations communities. And we could see clearly a shift in more governance, more shared decision making, more tenure ownership by First Nations. And it took us a little while, but we started to see ourselves as being a participant in that shift. And you know, once we started to get to that thinking and seeing, you know, the foundation agreement and having understanding of that and Lake Babin's strong interest in forestry, we could see the opportunity to start working towards something new and something different. So we sat down at the table, we started to talk openly around ideas and concepts and agreed to keep talking, and you know, away we went from there. So we were hungry to do something different, to do something new, something innovative, and hopefully build a model that could be replicated and could support reconciliation and at the same time improve fiber security and other really important things for the success of the forest sector in British Columbia. So we were looking to converge multiple ideas and create synergies, and you know, I think we really got a long ways there with what we were able to do together with Lake Babin.
And then I got a question here for Mike with the province here. Why was this opportunity worth supporting, and what potential did you see in bringing these parties together?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I mean, Duane and Jeff covered a lot of it. There were clear alignment of goals. And I think the establishment of the foundation agreement prior to entering into this helped us look at what Lake Babin's interests in forestry were. They were very clearly identified, and as Duane said, they had an interest into the future, and it was pretty specific. You know, Jeff talks about it, and we've known each other working in other areas of the province for a while. Certainty and more stability in fiber supply on the land base is important. It's important for all parties. And so we were looking at certain conditions, and I will say that we get approached often, all the time, with proposals, ideas, things that we need to look at or explore. I don't know if you realize we get told what to do a lot by everybody in this room. But we actually do explore all the proposals that are brought to us. And this one, because of those foundational things that were already in place, and they aligned with our goals, which was to diversify the participation in the forest sector, have tenure diversification, and look at, and Jeff talks about the regional approach, a win-win-win. It's a win for the nation, a win for the company, a win for that local area, the communities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, viable mill stability, and you know, workers in the area. What does a viable forest sector in each local area look like is very different. But when we were proposed or brought this proposal, it met a lot of things that aligned with our outcomes and goals too. So we were more than happy to lean in and help support it. It took a long time, but it was one of the more fleshed out ones that we've seen.
Thanks, Mike. You know, kind of going through the vision here, I know the journey had a few bumps, took a while, and partnership didn't happen overnight. And I know another question, you're kind of building this relationship towards Duane here. I know 4.5 years, you and I were at the table here, and it's a long process. What were some of the toughest moments during the negotiations, and what kept everyone moving forward?
Well, Phil, thanks for the question, Mike. You know, I think probably, Jeff, you probably right off the bat, you know, getting the time of day and you know, building the trust, you know, were probably some of the toughest things to do. But you know, we made sure that we had planned monthly, sometimes even like a couple meetings a month, meetings just to make sure that we could build this relationship and build this trust within one another. But you know, right off the bat, you know, there was some pretty tough conversations, and we slugged through those, and you know, we're happy to be where we're at today.
Thanks, Duane. And a question for you, Jeff, on just kind of how you built the relationship here. You know, as large forestry companies are often viewed, you know, as competitors of fiber and tenure, what mindset shift was required internally at West Fraser to approach this as a collaborative opportunity instead?
I think I touched on that a little bit already, but you know, historically, our fiber sourcing in British Columbia has been through two primary avenues, one being our own tenures, our own licenses with the province, and the other being through purchase on the market. And tenure has been seen as the ultimate form of fiber security, and it evolved through an agreement with government where, if investment was made in steel and concrete, there'd be access provided to the timber and the fiber required to operate that business. And over time, there's been a lot of things change, and today the value of that tenure, I don't think, is in many areas of the province what it was at one point. So we were looking to transition that, to convert that tenure into something more valuable through the agreement process with Lake Babine. And so that was, really at the heart of it for us. And again, at the end of the day, it's really about fiber security. So, long story short, we saw ourselves having more fiber security through a meaningful, robust, durable, long-term agreement with Lake Babine as the forest manager versus ourselves operating tenure. And so that's the shift. And in the partnership, we're there supporting. We've got foresters working with Lake Babine together, but to me, it's the right model because not only does everything begin with Lake Babine, they're involved every step of the way, all through the process, and building more capacity over time. And the vision over the long term is that, we'll operate the mill, they'll operate the forest management side, and together we need each other to succeed. But that's the transition that's really underway.
Thanks, Jeff. No, and we'll kind of want to bring Mike into the realm of this with building the relationship. I know we were at the table there, we were talking a lot and asking for a lot of asks and policy changes. One question for you, Mike, is what were some of the biggest policy, operational, or regulatory challenges that needed to be worked through to make this arrangement possible?
Yeah, absolutely. There were lots of different operational, policy, and regulatory challenges. There usually is. And this wasn't a clean or easy situation, but I do applaud the work that was done early days. I think Duane touched on it, is that there was obviously some pretty challenging conversations, and they had to build that trust that if the tenure was going to be transferred over, given essentially, what is the certainty long-term for everybody? And this idea of larger scale area-based tenures, and I don't want to get into the detail, but we had to look at the operational viability of that timber supply area. Was there a stable enough fiber supply to accommodate a larger, expanded area-based tenure with the existing volume-based tenures? And we also had to bring in BCTS as a full partner. BCTS often is seen as an independent licensee or independent operator. They're part of government, they're part of our ministry, they're part of the province. They had to be brought in, they had to align with the goals, and we needed to make it work, what their outcomes that were needed with the goals of these two groups. So bringing them early was not without its challenges, and I think Duane touched on it. We built trust as we went, and I applaud our local team, the local team of everybody up there that just kept meeting and kept working on it. But we needed to support the idea at the front and say how we could do things, not why we couldn't. There were some things we couldn't fix. I know pricing we looked at early, could we change or adapt the pricing to the license, and we couldn't fix pricing, but there were other things that we did say, it's different, it's going to be hard, but yeah, we're willing to look at this and maybe make some adjustments. With all the pressures on the forest sector in the last probably 10 or 15 years even, we have to be more open-minded, we have to be creative, and we have to look at if it meets the goals and the outcomes that we're all looking for, why wouldn't we lean in and try to make change?
Thanks, Mike. No, appreciate that. No, I know there was definitely a lot of hard work on all parties here to make this partnership really happen. And especially after the years of collaborations and problem solving and being at the table, week to week and daily and talking about what needs to be done next in the partnership. And I just kind of want to talk about some of the outcomes in the practical terms. Duane, I'm going to kind of start with you again here. With this agreement kind of coming finally being reached. This agreement resulted in a transformational increase in tenure volume for Lake Babine Forestry. Beyond the numbers, what does this mean for Lake Babine Nation economically, socially, and culturally?
Right. Major part of this deal was, making sure that the needs of Lake Babine Nation and Lake Babine Nation Forestry are going to be met. And, I mentioned earlier some of the things where, growing the control over our land base, making money for the nation and employment and training. But all of that, is good, but it also really helps out, the social aspect in Lake Babine Nation land, like creating more meaningful employment and training out there through some of our partnerships, getting our membership interested in forestry, getting our membership out there going into post-secondary schooling, and having West Fraser mentor some of our guys is just really tremendous for our nation. Like, Mike and I go around and do presentations to our nations, and we always have this pie chart showing where Lake Babine Nation was before this happened and where we are now. And at the very beginning, Lake Babine Nation hardly had any control or management over our tenures, and today, with the partnership and some other hard work that we've done, we've grown that up to roughly 40%. So
It's 43% roughly, about 340,000 cubic meters. Where they started off, you guys were at 2015 at 1,500 cubic meters, less than 1% of the AAC in their territory.
that's right. So that's something to be celebrated, and that's part of this partnership with West Fraser, and the spin-off is good because now you have our folks out there working in the industry, you have them paying bills, you have them just doing it. So it's absolutely massive for us, I would say.
Thanks, Duane. Yeah, and then I'm going to kind of lean over here to Jeff about some of the outcomes now in practical terms. And one of the key things that I think part of this deal is kind of missing here is that I want to kind of ask you is this deal involved transferring the tenure at no cost, which is highly unusual in the forestry sector. And what message do you think this sends about where the industry is headed?
I think it's an interesting question, Mike, because it's really, I guess, around perception of value, and for us, the tenure was available and on the table to be transferred without any compensation, monetary compensation, because on the back side we've got a long-term log supply agreement that provides that fiber security, and we've got the confidence in a forest management model that we think is going to be better than the one we've been operating in because of the relationship and the agreement that we have. And so those are the prerequisites to get to a place where a tenure transfer is possible without an expectation of monetary compensation. I think that's really the key, is it's about being able to understand that value. And those were the things that, I had to socialize internally with our leadership within our organization and our CEO, and kudos to them for seeing that, and also for helping to direct that to a place where we felt that we were comfortable to go down this path. And at the end of the day, you could look at this and say this is an investment in the future of forestry in British Columbia, but also more specifically in the region and the local economy in the Smithers area. So that's just some thoughts on our view there.
Thanks, Jeff. No, appreciate that. And then not to leave Mike out here, there was a role for the province here to play and to facilitate the process of expanding this First Nation woodland license, and it wasn't an easy process, and I'm just going to put it out there for Mike. What role did the province play in helping facilitate and transfer the First Nation woodland license for Lake Babine in the expansion process?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I think I'll pause just to reflect on the points that Jeff was making, because when he first called me, it feels like it was 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer, about this concept. That's a bold and innovative concept. A major license holder, a major company is going to give the tenure to a First Nation with no cost. So when we first hear that, we sort of think, what else is going on? I wonder what else is actually in the mix here. But the more we worked together, the more we looked at it, it's exactly what Jeff said. It's this idea, and we hear these words like certainty and predictability. We have to do that together. So we didn't, and again, a lot of the heavy lifting was done when it was brought to us. You know, all we said was, that sounds interesting. We absolutely want to support it. We'll be involved where we can. But as you're going along, and I don't know how many of you are aware, but back in 2019, there was changes to the Forest Act. So when any tenure is transferred, whether it's sold or just transferred or provided at no cost, there is a ministerial decision, a final decision on what is nebulously called the public interest test. And that's not a subjective what's in the public interest, but we don't want to get a situation where everyone does years of work, multi-years of work, and then the transfer itself doesn't get supported. So we worked with the groups to indicate the kind of things that would need to be considered in a tenure transfer decision. The minister has to stay arm's length because they are the statutory decision maker of that. And so we work with them, and it's what Duane and Jeff said is it's not only going to benefit the First Nation, who clearly wanted to expand their interest, their accountability, and their control of tenure within their territory, which is a great thing. It meets our goals of diversifying tenure ownership and increasing Indigenous participation in the forest sector. But it's also good for the regional economy. It's good for the mill and the workers, the contractors in the bush. And so we want to support it. But what are the things, that need to go along the way? BCTS was a big one. It had to be included in there, excuse me. And we wanted to make it, we couldn't say if you do all these things, the decision will be supported, but clarifying these are the things that will be considered in that public interest test. And to their credit, they all worked to make sure that all of those things were being considered. And again, unless you were working with it or in it directly for the nation, and Lake Babin's a great nation to partner with, the exponentially large increase in their license was historic. I think it was 2,000% increase in the size of this thing. So for us to actually go through the process of doing that, there are conditions that have to exist. The whole area that was identified, because it's an area-based license, was entirely within Lake Babin's territory. It didn't have overlap into other nations' territory. The area itself was essentially almost entirely in West Fraser's operating area. So we didn't have to go and rechart the TSA. There wasn't other licensees that we had to displace and say, this is now Lake Babin's tenure, you need to leave, they have exclusive right. We would have to compensate them. That didn't exist here. And we included BCTS and their needs. So a lot of the boxes were ticked along the way as we all worked together to talk about these things, so that when it did come up to the process to be faced with the public interest test, it was fairly quick. Like, we even talked about timing and what the needs were, and it was a celebrated event. It was a historic event that we went to Lake Babin's territory and were welcome there to go through the formal signing of the transfer. But all of those things behind the scenes needed to be worked on to end up with the outcome.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. No, again, getting the agreement signed was a major milestone for this group here, and was just really the beginning now, and part of the journey here. And the next thing was focusing on shifting our focus to making the partnership work on the ground now. And there are some lessons that we have learned, and so far, looking at since implementation began. And Duane, I'm going to start with you again. What were some of the biggest early lessons for LBN Forestry in managing this expanded tenure opportunity?
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a whole pile of things. Like, I said, I've spent most of my life in the industry, and, making sure that we had the capacity to be able to do the work at hand. We did a lot of work here to, acquire the tenure, and now we have to kind of shift gears here and think like, okay, well, that's good, but now we need to put, folks in place that, how to manage tenure and manage the land. We have to have the buy-in from our membership. Our membership has to, be involved. Our membership has to be well informed, and transparency has to be, we have to be accountable and transparent for, everything that we do. I think schooling too, like recently, Lake Baby Nation Forestry has decided to build our own training center. We hoped, and we are going to, train our own members to go out and work on our land stewardship. We need, registered professionals, because you can't practice forestry in BC without that stamp. So all of those things, we take into consideration. We're working on them, I would say.
Thanks, Duane. And then I'm just going to kind of shift over here to Jeff. What have you learned since implementation began, and what has surprised you most about how the partnership has evolved?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few learnings. One of the things I want to say is that we went into this and we tried to think of everything we could possibly think of, but you can't think of everything. And so at the end of the day, again, it comes back to the relationship and trust and commitment to each other, the basics of relationship. It's, so trusting that we don't know everything, but we're going to figure it out. And so the early stages have been figuring it out together and working through things. And one of the challenging things is today, as people would well know, the economy in the forest sector is brutally tough. We're in the worst cycle we've ever been in our history. And we've been in this cycle for a number of years, and I hope we're at the bottom, but that's where we're starting from in this agreement. And so there are not, big profits to go around. And Lake Babine is fully eyes wide open to that and fully aware of that. But this is a new model for them where, previously having less tenure, that tenure was marketed at times when, earnings could be generated, profits could be generated. Today, that the volumes flow on a more consistent and more regular basis, which aligns to our needs in the way that we need to operate a mill. But on the upside, there's cash flow and people are working, and there's more regularity and predictability in the community as well. So I think that's a big thing. If we'd started in a place where we were in a really high market and there were very high profits being distributed to all parties involved, and then we come off that, I think that would be a much more difficult cycle to work our way through. Now we can, look to the upside, and we're surviving at the bottom together, and that's where we're starting from. So, that's been a really interesting experience. I think generally, I think we see the process of doing forestry on the front end with the Guardian programs. There's elements that are new for us. But on the further downstream around when it comes time to apply for a cutting permit, I think that process is a lot smoother than conventional processes where consultation's occurring at that cutting permit stage. So those were some things we anticipated as being experiences we would have and improvements that we would realize. And so those are a few early pieces. And just the last one is just on the administration. So working together through looking for efficiencies in how we perform the business of forest management and just manage the financial affairs. Is all these things we're figuring out together as we go. But I feel like we're in a really good spot. We've got great people working on this stuff, and we're doing it. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Jeff. No, and then I'll kind of lean over to Mike here. What lessons has government learned about supporting partnerships of this scale and complexity?
Yeah, a lot of learnings from it, in addition to what's already been said. I mean, we're a very large organization as well, the government of BC, and our ministry is big. Something like this needs champions because as we're working through it, we need to make sure we're aligned, and to be honest, we're not always aligned, and we're not always saying the same thing. And expanding a tenure of this size was new to us. Area-based tenures on a large scale is a relatively new approach. So getting through the fact that it wasn't a purchase, that it was a transfer with an agreement to partner together, turned out to be a novel idea, which was excellent. And so when you're working through things, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And we have to make sure that we're trying to be creative as well. But we have obligations to consider that are much broader than any single company or any single nation. But I think Duane touched on it, and he's very understated. They have an incredibly active, robust, and future-looking forest company, and it's excellent to see. But with tenure and with having those things, there's a lot of obligations that come with it. So it's a daunting thing, and we're working with other nations who are realizing when you take on those things, you do have to understand the obligations, and then, as Duane said, have people that actually can understand, be educated, trained, and you grow. And I really like how everyone's looking generations out ahead, but we learned a lot from it, and we continue to learn. And, we hope this is a great example that others can look at to be, as Jeff said, a way to get through this tough cycle and even benefit more in the better years to come. There's a bunch of other thoughts I have, but yeah, that clicking red clock in front of us is there, so I'll stop.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I know I see the clock wind down here too. Just kind of looking forward, thinking here into the future here, and just asking you guys what you think. Duane, how does LBN Forestry's plan to build on this opportunity, and what legacy do you hope this creates for future generations of Lake Babine Nation members?
Yeah, that's basically what we're doing. Like it was touched on multiple times up here. We want to make sure we keep the forest economy going in our region. We want to make sure that Lake Babine Nation Forestry is alive and thriving, as well as PIR. We want to invest in our communities. Like we've built new ball fields. We've supported so many other different things that are happening that are very positive. We want to get our youth out there training and working in the industry. There's just nothing but big uptick with everything, I would say.
Thanks, Duane. Just going to throw this one up to Jeff here. How do you see partnerships like this fitting into West Fraser's long-term vision for working with Indigenous communities and forestry in British Columbia?
Yeah, I think the learnings that we've discovered working with Lake Babine along the journey and the multi-year process we've been through, we can take that to the table with any Indigenous community in British Columbia today. And we are, and vice versa. In conversations we've had with other communities, we brought the learnings to the table with Duane and others as well. I think we need to keep doing that and looking for those opportunities, recognizing that each community, each nation is unique and will have different approaches, but there's some principles and some things here that could hopefully provide benefit towards a model that could be replicated. And I think as we go look to the future in the province, we want to do more of this work. I don't think that, I don't know that all of the fiber sourcing would be through this model, but this is part of the puzzle that needs to be solved to improve, I think, again, fiber security in British Columbia. So working with communities, working with First Nations communities, and striking a new balance in what goes on in the land base and how the land base is managed, this is a key piece of it in our view, and we're in discussions with other nations on similar concepts today, and look forward to bringing those to the light of day and the public facing probably this year, a few more. So yeah, that's definitely where we want to go.
Thanks, Jeff. No, I'm going to put the question to the province here, Mike. And do you see agreements like this becoming more common in British Columbia, and what changes might help support future partnerships?
Yeah, we hope so, for sure. I think both Jeff and Duane have talked about the partnership they have. It's not one group against another group or one group over top of another group. It's a real partnership. There does have to be the conditions that exist, though, and I think Jeff talked about the regional differences, all the differences with the variety of nations that we all work with. So it's not a blanket, yeah, this will work everywhere. The conditions have to exist, and one of the main ones is the stability of fiber supply. I think many of us in this room are aware that there are changing conditions on the land base, changing constraints and policies on the land base, and the conditions with climate change and wildfire, and whether we've done a timber supply review in the last 10 years or not, the AACs that exist might not actually be accurate for what is real on the land base. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but we do hope the conversations are happening, because I think they both talked about an underused or maybe overused and well enough understood word of trust. There's a real trust here, and that also gave us confidence that this would work. Where in many areas, industry, nations, and the government are in an adversarial relationship, not in a trusting relationship. I threw myself in with the group that they trust all of us, including me. Maybe they don't, but they trust each other, which is the most important thing.
Thanks, Mike. No, and I'm going to probably throw this out here to all three of you.
I kid around all the time, too.
Yeah, no thanks, Mike. Just the question put out to all three of you. Based on your experience, what lessons would you share with others looking to build meaningful forestry partnerships?
Big on my mind right away is coming up with some sort of a footing, like a foundation agreement, establishing a limited or some sort of company that works at arm's length from leadership is probably a big one. And you know what, maybe even just knocking on doors and getting to meet the Jeffs of the world and talking it out.
What about you, Jeff or Mike? Any comment with the question? How to build on the meaningful forestry partnerships? Just a way in the future here? I'll repeat it here. Just based on your experience, what lessons would you share with others looking to build meaningful forestry partnerships?
Sorry, I'm not getting you there, Mike.
No? Oh, sorry. Based on your experience, what lessons would you share with others looking to build meaningful forestry partnerships?
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, sorry about that. I think you got to be brave. You got to, both parties, you got to come to the table, and you've got to be open and candid and honest in your interests, but at the same time, you've got to seek to understand the party's interests on the other side of the table, and you've got to look for ways to try and advocate for each other, to try and fulfill those interests. And then, as you work through that, you'll start to find areas where those interests converge, and then something unique starts to happen. You start to build something new that neither one of you envisioned when you first came to the table. And hopefully that starts to take you down a path. But you've got to, I think it's really important that you establish the principles to govern the relationship early, and principles of respect, principles around, again, advocating for each other's interests and seeking to understand, and really advocating for each other and looking for mutual benefit, looking for, if something only benefits one party, it's not going to work. It won't last. It's not going to be durable. And so, those are, I think, some key learnings. And I'd say that to First Nations communities that are interested in trying to advance down these pathways. But I also say it to other companies that are interested in advancing down those pathways. They're just basic relationship principles, but you've got to start there. If you're coming in from a very positional place and you're laying demands on the table, the conversation will die very quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you don't know everything at the front, but get everything on the table that you do know. Don't hold things back. Don't have a hidden agenda. Put all the issues, challenges, desires on the table, and then you work through it together. If you do, that'll help build trust, because if not, then, as Jeff said, things will die very early.
Thanks, Mike. I see our time's winding down. We're down to 30 seconds here. So I'm just going to provide some closing remarks here. Just like I said, we've heard from the partners here, from industry, First Nations, and government, that meaningful partnerships do take time, and they require trust, strong leadership, and commitment to working together towards one common goal. And as well, too, creating long-term opportunities, supporting reconciliation, and building a stronger future for forestry in British Columbia. And so on behalf of everyone here today, I want to thank Duane Crouse, Jeff Mycock, and Mike Hykaway for sharing their experience and insights on this innovative partnership. And more importantly, I want to thank LBN's leadership and some of the dedication they provided through these negotiations, as well as government and industry, and the collaboration that helped make this partnership an actual reality. And I want to thank everyone for allowing us to speak and share this journey of this wonderful partnership that we have right now. And again, thank you for C3 for allowing us to sit here in the panel and share this great story. How it's so, Ms. High.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you so much to Mike and to all of the panelists for that really engaging conversation on a really innovative partnership. Of course, we have a speaker gift for each of you, and we're going to take a quick photo. We have one session left today, so I really encourage you all to keep your seats. It's going to be a rock star panel. With that, I'll just remind you all that we're going to use Slido once again for the next session, so scan the QR codes in your program or when it comes up on the screen, and we'll try to get to some of those questions.